It's January 2026. And behind me is Newbury's Kennet Shopping Centre. After a long illness, it has finally died. It is no more, it is a dead mall. But in this video, I'm going to explore its history, right back from the 1960s to the present day, to look at this modern edifice, how it came to be, and what went so horribly wrong, and then what is going to happen to this place in the future. Because what you're about to witness is one of South East England's biggest town centre regenerations in a century. So I guess this video is really intended for people who live in West Berkshire, or who at least know where Newbury is in the world. But for my many international subscribers, if you'd like to stay and learn a bit of niche British history, you're more than welcome. So for you, Newbury is a medium-sized historic market town in the southeast of England, about 40 miles west of London. Newbury can trace its origins back to the 1st century AD, during the Roman occupation of Britain. But today, it's a medium-sized market town with around 34,000 residents, and is one of the more affluent towns in the southeast of England. The subject of our documentary, for the past 50 years, the town centre has been dominated by the massive Kennet Centre shopping mall. But not for much longer, as the Kennet Centre today is a dead mall. Kennet Centre's physical presence started in the year 1972, but it didn't appear out of nowhere. The land that it sits on today is part of its history and reason for being. And much of that history will be resurrected once the mall is gone in a few coming years. You could say that the origin of the Kennet Centre isn't the year 1972, but 1596, over 430 years ago, because that is when Newbury's original shopping centre opened, the Royal Charter Market held in the Market Square. 100 metres from the Kennet Centre entrance is this plaque set into the cobbles of Newbury Market Square. This dates when Newbury Market received its royal charter from Queen Elizabeth I in 1596. The charter was in effect the licence to operate a market. The marketplace in the 16, 17 and 1800s was the shopping mall of today, and it drew in people from surrounding villages up to 20 miles away. As we can see from Thomas Rollinson's sketch of 1800, Newbury Marketplace was a rowdy affair. As well as buying and selling, you can see here some poor soul getting pelted in the stocks for upsetting the local magistrate. From one of the oldest accurate maps of Berkshire, the John Rock map of 1763, we can see that in the mid-18th century, Newbury principally consisted of two streets running north to south. And these were to the west, Bartholomew Street, and to the east, Cheap Street, leading to the Market Square. Both streets exist to this day. The land between these two streets was divided up into so-called burgage plots of land. I'll put a definition on the screen for you. I'm going to call this area of land between the two main streets in Newbury, containing all the burgage plots, the Eagle Triangle, and the reason for this nickname will become apparent soon. And this photograph shows the Eagle Triangle 200 years later. From the late 18th century onwards, the Eagle Triangle was heavily built on. This photograph shows most of those buildings still standing in the mid-1960s. And in 2026, from Google Earth, we can see that the Eagle Triangle now is home to the massive Kennet shopping mall. So the question is, how did we go from a 19th century residential district to the massive shopping metropolis that is the Kennet Centre? Well, to tell that story, we need to go back really to the end of the 1800s. In 1878, Newbury Town Hall, its governance, was built in a neo-Gothic style at the tip of the Eagle Triangle, intentionally overlooking the Market Square. But immediately this brought the council members into conflict with the district's other largest occupier, Plenty's Ironworks. In 1790, a gentleman called William Plenty started an engineering company in Southampton building steam engines. In the early 19th century, however, he moved the business to Newbury, opening a workshop he named the Eagle Ironworks, hence the name the Eagle Triangle. and for a while it was Newbury's largest business. Attached to the walls of the town hall are signs that forbid the use of traction engines, steam engines in Mansion House Street. Soon after its occupation, the council members working in the town hall needed to pass a bylaw to prevent steam engines using Mansion House Street because they kept clattering past on their way to Plenty's ironworks, thus disturbing the council members in their very important work. And those signs still stand today, even though we haven't got any steam engines anymore. In 1965, Plenty & Sons took advantage of new zoning rules to move their premises into more modern facilities on their new Hambridge Road light industrial area. The now former Eagle Ironworks, from 1965 onwards, became redundant and then derelict. The former Eagle Ironworks, 1790 to 1965, is remembered by this blue plaque provided by the Newbury Society, fixed to a wall on Market Street. From 1965 until 2001, Plenty & Sons traded from the Hambridge Road industrial estate. A Plenty & Sons marine diesel engine still marks the entrance to their former establishment, and the road off Hambridge Road is now known as Plenty Close. In Britain, after the austere post-World War II 1950s, the 1960s saw the first green shoots of economic recovery. The government detailed a plan to create London overspill cities to the east, west and north of the capital. One of those towns identified for expansion and redevelopment was Newbury. But after much local protest, Newbury was spared redevelopment expansion, with expansion stopping as far west as Reading. Even though the central government plan to expand Newbury into a city was put on ice, as part of the 1964 planning exercise, Newbury Borough Council had identified the Eagle Triangle to be rezoned from residential to business and retail use to serve the shopping needs of the expanding Newbury. This was an easy decision to make due to the proximity to the Market Square and also the existing shopping high street, Northbrook Street. Another reason was the housing stock in the Eagle Triangle, dating from the early 19th century, was in very poor condition. It was in effect a slum. Because it housed the seat of local government in the town hall, the historic northern tip of the Eagle Triangle would be spared any redevelopment. And because of this decision, in 2026 you can find the old 19th century burgage layout still pretty much extant if you visit today. You can experience the old burgage system because one alleyway of it still exists, the arcade. Let's take a walk through and go back to the early 1800s. In 2026, the arcade is now home to boutique businesses, but right up until the early 1960s, it would have been purely residential, and the housing stock would have had no central heating, some without running water, and often they shared an outside toilet. This burgage poverty would have been a stark difference to the Victorian 1800s townhouses that were on the edge of the triangle, which faced Bartholomew Street and Cheap Street. From the late 1950s onwards, Newbury Borough Council has been building new social housing in areas like Rowan Drive and Shaw. So people were no longer prepared to utilise the early 1800s poor quality housing stock with outside toilets and no central heating. In 1965, it was decided by Newbury Borough Council to purchase the land in the Eagle Triangle and completely clear it for redevelopment. This map is an oversimplification because it took the best part of a decade, from 1968 to 1977, to purchase and clear all the land. But the council started with the old Eagle Ironworks and the southern end of the triangle. Concurrently, the Borough Council sought a commercial partner to redevelop the newly acquired land and provide Newbury with something new, a pedestrianised shopping precinct. In mid-1966, Newbury Town Council teamed with commercial partner Ravenseth Properties Limited to redevelop the Eagle Triangle. Ravenseth specialised in transforming legacy brownfield sites and World War II bomb sites into pedestrianised shopping precincts and housing. In mid-1970, Britain's biggest grocery retailer, Sainsbury's Limited, came on board the project with a major investment to provide Newbury its first dedicated supermarket, to be the anchor store of Ravenseth's major project. In early 1972, directly funded by Sainsbury's themselves, Ravenseth Limited constructed the first building of the Eagle Triangle redevelopment, a red brick style structure to fit in with the surrounding buildings. And in August 1972, Newbury's first dedicated supermarket opened its doors for the first time. But Sainsbury's paying a premium to be the first in the development did cause other problems because there was nowhere yet to park, so their customers had to park on the dirt strip of land opposite the supermarket on the site of the former cattle market. And if you look close enough, you can still find numbers 4 to 10 The Mall, the original building on the Kennet Centre site, the original Sainsbury's back from 1972, still present. Well, for a few more months until it's demolished. As we'll discuss later in the video, Sainsbury's departed this building in 1994, and then the upper floor of which was converted into a nightclub which had various owners and various names throughout the coming years, always with a bad reputation. And somewhat ironic that it was located directly opposite the site of Newbury's former cattle market. The supermarket wasn't intended to be a standalone building. It was simply built first because Sainsbury's funded it themselves. The supermarket was to be the anchor store of a wider shopping precinct to be called the Mall, Newbury. The next to be built was the parking structure because of the embarrassment caused by Sainsbury's customers parking in the mud. Although an improvement on the muddy field, the multi-storey parking structure for the Mall was in the wrong place. It was a bad plan because housewives had to struggle across from Sainsbury's with their shopping in hand across the busy Market Street. Then from 1972 to 1977, but mainly during 1974, the remainder of the Mall Newbury was constructed by Ravenseth. It was open air, but there was a top deck service area which sheltered the pedestrian shoppers underneath from the elements. On the western flank, funded by the council, was Newbury's new modern bus station. This was relatively short-lived, and the bus station would move locations twice in the next 40 years. And then on the eastern flank was a tarmacked parking area, providing the convenience for Sainsbury's customers to move their groceries to their car without having to cross Market Street. And this is that car park in the early 1980s. As you can see to the right of the photograph, the old Mall structure and the access ramp to the service areas. In common with all early 1970s shopping precincts in the UK, the public areas of the Mall Newbury are open air. And this is the original central square of the Mall. The Mall Newbury was considered complete in 1977, and if you want to have a look at the old structure, for a few more months that is, you can see it from Cheap Street. This then is a view around 1979-1980, looking towards the Town Hall along Cheap Street. And in 2026, for a few more months at least, you can see the old 1970s Mall structure subsumed into the Kennet Centre from Cheap Street itself. Here then is a fact that not many people are aware of. The Kennet Centre is actually two shopping malls combined together. The 1970s constructed the Mall, and then the 1980s superstructure which became known as the Kennet Centre. And the reason for that is politics and economics. Back in 1966, when Newbury Council brought Ravenseth Properties on board, it was always planned that the entire Eagle Triangle would be redeveloped as a pedestrianised shopping precinct. But by the time the Mall Newbury was complete in the southern half of the triangle in 1977, Britain's political and economic situation was dire. Ravenstheft then got cold feet and refused to fund the development of the northern half of the triangle. By 1978, the northern half of the Eagle Triangle was now a desolate wasteland. What the locals called the Mall Precinct, or sometimes with derision, the Mall Bomb Site. With redevelopment completely stalled, the council landscaped the area as a open-air park and open-air car parking. While Newbury Council negotiated with new business partners, much to their relief, in 1980, Ravenstheft's parent company, Land Securities, took over the ownership of the Mall and proposed a new concept to Newbury Council, that the whole Eagle Triangle be redeveloped into an American-style indoor shopping mall. Before the new shopping centre could be constructed, one of the bad decisions of the 1970s had to be rectified, and that was to move the bus station away from the triangle and onto the site of the ill-thought-out 1972 parking structure, and this was demolished in 1980. It was planned that the new shopping centre would have a fully integrated on-site parking structure which would be located on the site of the old bus station. In 1982, after a public consultation, plans for Newbury's new massive shopping structure were approved. But rather than demolish the 1972 Mall, it would be subsumed into the new structure. It would be weatherproofed and a massive glass canopy placed over the old Mall Square. In the beginning of 1984, construction of the new superstructure got underway. It would take about 2 years. One of the problems that Land Securities planners had with the council was on the perimeter of the new development on Market Street and Cheap Street were a number of listed buildings that must be untouched, and these were encapsulated within the new shopping mall. Two of these will be very familiar to locals from Newbury. On Bartholomew Street, the Bricklayer's Arms, now called the Newbury, from 1800, and on Cheap Street, the Cattle Mill, dating from around 1890. The majority of the new structure was constructed during the year 1984, with the final opening being in early 1986. And if you walk around the perimeter for the time being, you can see the ironwork still bears the year of its construction. Although from 1972 onwards, the Eagle Triangle's shopping precinct was known as the Mall Newbury, and then during the redevelopment phase from 1980 to 1986, it was called the Mall Phase 2. When it was finally opened, the new shopping centre was named the Kennet Centre, named after the river that runs through the centre of Newbury. And here is some of the livery that you would find on the entrances to the new shopping centre in 1986. The main superstructure was completed in 1985 and opened in 1986, but it would take a further year and a bit before the shopping centre's parking structure on the corner of Market Street and Bartholomew Street was completed. Finished in the year 1987, this is the parking structure that still stands to this day, and it will continue well into the 21st century. Like the 1972 structure, it is built in red brick, intended to fit in with local architecture. However, its fortress-like walls did cause planners some aesthetical concerns. And to solve the problem of this unimpressive fortress-like wall, Land Securities commissioned several pieces of artwork that became known as the Kennet Centre bronzes. And here they are in all their glory on Market Street, set into recesses in the new car park wall, 6 bronze bas-relief panels. Installed in 1987, they've become a bit of a familiar feature to the people of Newbury. I'm going to spill the Kennet Centre bronze's dirty secret now. They're not actually bronze at all, but fiberglass and resin with a bronze colour gel coat. Do you feel cheated now? It's okay, the subterfuge held out for 40 years, but you look now and you can see the fiberglass starting to deteriorate. The 6 bas-relief panels are the work of Scottish artist Charles Anderson, working on a commission from Land Security plc directly for the Kennet Centre in 1987. And we will see more of Charles Anderson's work when we look inside the centre. Fake they may be, but they're 40 years old and popular with the people of Newbury, and there is now a local campaign to save them and have them re-sited to a new site within the town. By 1986, the Kennet Centre was opening and functioning well, and its commercial success prompted interest from one of the biggest retailers in the United Kingdom, Debenhams plc, who expressed an interest to come aboard as its third anchor store, together with Sainsbury's from 1972 and then Marks and Spencer's from 1984. The problem was there was nowhere for a Debenhams anchor store to go, so Land Securities built them their own annex, nicknamed in 1989 the Debenhams Annex. Nobody knew it at the time in 1989, but the construction of the Debenhams Annex, from concept to occupation in just 12 months, was the high watermark for retail in Newbury and indeed the country. And Debenhams' fall for grace to bankruptcy 20 years later would be allegorical for the state of retail in the West. In 2026, the Debenhams Annex has been empty and boarded up for over a decade. Found on the side of the Debenhams Annex is ironwork with the date 1989 impressed on it. It really seems like a fossil from a bygone era when retail was king. And for a while, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Kennet Centre was one of the most popular shopping malls in South East England. It even had its own sponsored hot air balloon for advertising purposes that would tour the country. Nobody yet knew it or could have reasonably forecast what would happen in the future, but in 1994 the start of the end of the centre began, because in that year its original anchor store, Sainsbury's, moved to a new premises, a purpose-built super centre on the opposite side of the A339. Discount clothing retailer TK Maxx would take over the former 1972 supermarket, but they were not considered an anchor store replacement. A consequence of this was that now people no longer needed to visit the Kennet Centre to buy groceries. As footfall decreased in the centre after the new millennium, new initiatives were considered, because for a long time it had been thought that the southeastern corner car park was underutilised space. But no retailer would commit to becoming an anchor store, so Landsec sought a different strategy, another American concept: the integrated shopping mall, multiplex cinema and a night-time economy with chain restaurants. Newbury's last cinema, the Forum, on Parkway, opened in 1939 and it closed in 1998. It was a single-screen flea pit design from the 1930s. And for 10 years after that, Newbury had no cinema. So Landsec, working together with View Cinemas International, proposed constructing a 7-screen multiplex cinema on the southeastern corner of the Kennet Centre to incorporate on the ground floor a number of chain restaurants. The whole cinema multiplex will be incorporated into the Kennet shopping experience. This is the scene approaching the southeast corner of the Kennet Centre along Cheap Street from the south in 2007. Within a year, the View Cinema had been constructed on this site, and this is the view today. The View Cinema at the Kennet Centre opened its doors to the public for the first time in the year 2008, and you can see that the architecture differs vastly from the Kennet Centre's oldest building, the 1972 Sainsbury's. Taking advantage of the free publicity the opening of the cinema generated in the media, the Kennet Centre also conducted a superficial facelift of the centre, and this consisted principally of new external signage, a new livery and a new logo. Also, for the first time, a dedicated online presence, because it was noted that the public were now starting to buy as much online as they were from physical stores. By the beginning of the year 2008, the Kennet Centre's footfall was significantly down from its peak in the mid-1990s. The new cinema had brought in extra custom, but the public's shopping habits were changing, brought about by online shopping. But nobody could forecast what else the year 2008 would bring.
Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
A crisis that started in the MBS bond market in America spread quickly throughout the world. At a macroeconomic level, it starved businesses of capital investment. But at lower levels, people feared for job security and there was less money to spend on non-essential purchases. Retail in the UK began a death spiral. The death of retail was accelerated by greedy local authorities imposing excessive council tax business rate demands. While struggling to recover from the global financial crisis, in 2011, a rival shopping precinct was opened in Newbury, Parkway Shopping, which was principally a residential development but with street-level integrated open-air retail. Parkway was seen as more modern and upmarket than the tired 1980s Kennet Centre, and for that reason, Debenhams jumped ship and became Parkway's anchor store, abandoning the Kennet Centre. For a while, for the next 9 years, both Newbury shopping areas coexisted, but it became clearer and clearer that the Kennet Centre was now in serious decline. So much so that in the year 2015, the centre was sold to HIG Capital for £30 million, with the intention of reviving its fortunes by refurbishing it. Very soon though, HIG Capital realised their horrendous mistake and the amount of money that it would need to invest in the Kennet Centre to modernise it. They again put it up for sale in the year 2019, but initially there were no takers. By the year 2020, the Kennet Centre was very sick indeed, but it would be a human disease that would finally finish it off.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home, because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. That is why people will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes.
With the benefit of hindsight, the government ordered lockdowns of 2020, 2021 were an act of unrivalled economic self-harm that totally destroyed the British economy and took down thousands of otherwise viable businesses. During this period, the only footfall the Kennet Centre saw were people visiting the makeshift NHS vaccination centre in an already vacant unit. When the COVID hysteria was finally over, by mid-2022, many businesses did not return to the centre. The COVID lockdowns were the final blow to the centre's future. It was now a dead mouse and its closure inevitable. So, we've visited the outside of the Kennet Centre, all the externals. Let's take a tour inside it during the last week of its life. Walking through the Kennet Centre in the last weeks of its life was eerie indeed, almost like the zombie apocalypse had happened. Most of the units had been empty for years, but compare 2026 to the centre's heyday in the mid-1990s, where all the units were occupied and it was bustling with shoppers. Every so often you'll come across a unit still trading, like Shoe Zone, which has been having a closing down sale for the last decade, but this time I think they genuinely mean it.
That's kats.org.uk.
Like those mythical radio stations that will continue broadcasting to the world after humanity's been wiped out during a nuclear war, but Kennet Radio still blasts shopping music to a completely empty mall. The central square of the 1972 mall, which was covered in 1984 during the construction of the Kennet Centre, sits empty. Compare and contrast with the hub of social activity you found here in 1986. Long gone are the luxurious mid-1980s fountains, tropical fish tanks and boutique kiosks that once enticed shoppers through the doors of the Kennet Centre. Although surprisingly what does survive from 1986 are the Kennet murals, which adorn the southern end of the mall. These three huge oil paintings were originally commissioned in 1986 by Land Securities plc, specifically for the Kennet Centre, and were created by artist Charles Anderson, who we've already met, because as we know, he created the bronze relief panels on the external wall in 1987. There are three stainless steel framed mural panels in total, each one 2 metres in height, and together they stretch over 20 metres in length. Over their 20-metre journey, the murals tell the history of Newbury town centre from Roman occupation right up to the present day. Like the bronze bas relief panels, there is now a campaign to save the murals for future generations. Finally, we exit the Kennet Centre via the only functioning business left, the View Cinema Annex, which houses, also on the ground floor, the Kung Fu Chinese buffet and Nando's restaurant. But fear not, cinema and Nando's lovers, this section of the centre is not closing, as the centre's new owners are retaining the cinema annex as a standalone business. It is a coincidence that directly opposite the Kennet Centre, literally the other side of the street, are the offices of West Berkshire Council and the scene of what I'm going to call the War of the Eagle Quarter that lasted from 2020 to 2026. Let me tell that story. In early 2020, after a year on the market, with the COVID crisis gripping the world and the UK starting its first national lockdown, the Kennet Centre was bought by a partnership of property developer Epilogue and property management company Rivington Hark. It was in effect a fire sale. HIG Capital bought the centre in 2015 for £30 million. The asking price in 2019 was £19 million. The Kennet Centre was finally sold for just £9 million. The maths is fairly damning. HIG Capital effectively lost £21 million on the Kennet Centre. Prior to sealing the property deal, Epilogue had already approached West Berkshire Council with plans to demolish the Kennet Centre, which is now a dead mall, and rebuild a mixed residential and retail development in its place, similar in scale to the Newbury Parkway development. In mid-2021, Epilogue finally unveiled their plans for the replacement for the Kennet Centre, the Eagle Quarter. The Eagle Quarter effectively replaced the Kennet Centre with a wide, open, pedestrianised retail street connecting the station with the town centre, and above that, several blocks of apartments ranging in height between 8 and 11 stories. The cinema annex and the multi-storey car park would be refurbished and retained. At the street level, the Eagle Quarter concept was really good, but putting high-rise apartments in a historical market town centre caused outrage amongst local heritage organisations, and the elected council members of West Berkshire were lobbied hard. Between 2021 and 2022 there was a public consultation, and at the end of that the planning department indicated to the developers, Epilogue, that they would be recommending to the planning committee that the plans be accepted. When the Eagle Quarter plans came before the elected planning committee, despite assurances given by the town planners, the committee members rejected the Eagle Quarter development and told Epilogue to go back to the drawing board. The elected committee raised 92 objections. The principal objection was the imposing height of the blocks of apartments proposed in comparison to similar developments in Newbury. Examples given were the 5 or 6 storey racecourse apartments a mile away and Sterling Gardens 7 stories half a mile away. And Epilogue was proposing 11 stories high in the historic centre of Newbury in the Eagle Quarter development. Epilogue went away with their tail between their legs, whilst their architects worked on new plans that would address the 92 objections raised by the planning committee. And so, in 2023, they submitted new plans, which were dubbed Eagle Quarter 2. Now the maximum height of the apartment blocks will be between 6 and 8 stories, with additional heritage features on the perimeter to fit in with the historic town centre setting. The Eagle Quarter 2 plans were put to public consultation during 2024. But now heritage groups opposing the development were becoming more militant and organised, with council members being put under severe political pressure. When the proposal was finally voted on in 2025, it was again rejected. It is fair to say after 5 years of planning battles, Epilogue did not take the news well, and relations between the council and the developer became strained indeed. The stakes were indeed high. Epilogue was stuck with a £9 million dead mal, which they could not redevelop, and was losing them hundreds of thousands of pounds a year in running costs. Conversely, the council risked Epilogue walking away from the project and leaving them with a dead mal which would destroy the heart of Newbury and bring it down with crime and antisocial behaviour, something seen in many similar towns in the UK. In one last throw of the dice, Epilogue appealed to the central government planning inspector. Answering to the Secretary of State, the planning inspector had the power to overturn West Berkshire Council's objections and impose the Eagle Quarter 2 development on the town. After a week of submissions, the planning inspector chose to reject Epilogue's appeal. After a 5-year planning war, the Eagle Quarter development was dead in the water. In fairness, Epilogue could have walked away at this point, shuttering up the dead Kennet Centre and leaving it to rot in a land bank. But instead, the company surprised everybody with a completely new proposal: the Old Town development. The Old Town development is a complete new vision for the redevelopment of the Eagle Triangle. As before, the Kennet Centre will be demolished in its entirety, but the View Cinema Annex will be retained as a standalone business, and the multi-storey car park will have an additional deck and be refurbished. Once complete, in 2029 or 2030, where the Kennet Centre once stood will now be a community of courtyards with coach houses, mews houses and low-rise apartment buildings. As well as getting rid of the Eagle Quarters tower blocks, there will now be no pedestrian retail boulevard. The purple overlay shows the public access for pedestrians only. Vehicle access will be for residents only, and even then will be severely restricted. The main entrance to the Old Town development will be from Market Street via a concierge-controlled gate. And then there will be 2 additional residents-only vehicle access points, one from Bartholomew Street and one from Cheap Street. Pedestrian access to the north end of the development will be residents only via electronically controlled gates. Although the Old Town is now principally a residential neighbourhood, there are still 5 new retail units to be constructed in the north of the development, facing Bartholomew Street and the Market Square. OK Lord's stated concept is to build high quality dwellings that match the historic architecture of the Old Town of Newbury, hence the name of the development, and the concept art looks impressive. But be warned, these are going to come at a cost. There is intentionally no affordable housing planned for this development, so expect to pay £500,000 for a 3-bedroom townhouse and £250,000–300,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment. But I think a few people can now argue that it is not time for the dead Kennet Centre to be demolished and for a new neighbourhood to rise on the Eagle Triangle from where it once stood, built to a quality that would last for over a century. Well, that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed that niche piece of British history. To wrap the video up, I've brought you to another historical place, the Queen Victoria Memorial in Newbury from 1907. Because very soon, like Queen Victoria, the Kennet Centre will be assigned to history. In 3 short years, a new community will be formed on the ground it once stood, the Old Town development. And we'll come back in 3 years to see how that turns out. As ever, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, helps me out with the algorithm. And if you enjoy niche history content, consider subscribing to my channel, because I'd love to have you aboard. That's it, bye now.